Listen, we only get one shot at this.
Why not live life on our own terms? Hey everyone, it's Tom Kradza, and this is a really important episode for a few reasons. Nick and I sit down on this episode with the co-founder of Ledn, Mauricio Di Bartolomeo. I hope I pronounced that name okay. And it's fascinating for a whole bunch of reasons. First, the first part of this episode, maybe the first 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so, he goes through his story. Mauricio, grew up in Venezuela, came to Canada, went to the University of Western for a business degree, and then he started this financial institution in Toronto. It's a Canadian-based company. And what these guys do is they offer bank accounts, like lending accounts with actual interest on things like Bitcoin and USDC. So that's a US dollar stable coin. And the interest rates are just like astronomical. It's like 6% on Bitcoin, like 12.5% on USDC. And, whether you agree with buying some of this stuff, Bitcoin or not Bitcoin, I think we all have to acknowledge there's a lot of changes happening right in front of our eyes. And we strongly believe that to live life on your terms, you need to be aware of these changes. And that's what we're trying to do our best here, is to educate ourselves and to share some of that information. So that's why we're so pumped to bring on someone like Mauricio to share his story. And when you hear his story of what they've gone through in Venezuela and why he chose to leave, what his family went through, how there was basically a black market for US dollars and what they went through in trading US dollars. I mean, that's very educational when it comes to anyone who's thinking they might try to ban Bitcoin in different countries. It's just hearing that whole story, and it's in and of itself is educational, never mind some of the stuff that he's doing with Ledn. But I think there's a bigger, broader thing going on here. If you've read The Sovereign Individual, which is a book that we really like, we've shared it around. I think I cleaned out Amazon.ca of their last few copies and Indigo. So if you're trying to get a copy, that we might be the guilty people who bought all those copies. I'm sure they'll replenish them soon. But if you haven't read that book, it was written 20 years ago, and it really just outlines some of the trends that these authors thought would emerge over the information age, as they were calling it. And they've really called a lot of things really accurately, especially around social media and this idea of like an electronic cash or an e-cash they were referring to. And when you look at Bitcoin today, it kind of relates directly to what they were talking about for that e-cash system that they thought would evolve on the internet. So just the idea that nation states could come under pressure from sovereign individuals, just fascinating. Whether you agree with it or not, it's just a fascinating book. And then there's books like The Fourth Turning that call for major economic cycle changes every 80, 100 years, and even greater ones every 500 years or so. And when you read that book, and we're right about that point in economic history of that 80 to 100 year cycle change, and we're in that fourth turning moment, and you look around what's happening in the world, it gives you a lot of context for making sense of some of the madness out there. So I think bringing Mauricio on here, to us, it's almost like we're seeing the birth of a brand new financial system in some areas that just didn't even exist a few years ago. So we're just really excited to be able to share his message, and then to share what Ledn's doing, to give actual interest, like 6% on Bitcoin, I think it is, and 12% on USDC. It's just interesting to learn about these things, and then some of the risks and some of the options that we have in this whole world that we all need to educate ourselves on. And Nick and I think, almost wish that we did this episode again. So we'll have to bring him on again, because we've learned so much in the few days that have passed since we recorded this episode. We have, I think, much better questions to ask Mauricio around security and some of the things that they're doing, and just some of the things to think about in this space. So we'll likely ask to bring him back on again shortly so we can dive even deeper into this. So treat this first episode with him as a bit of a primer, just an introduction to him and his story and what Ledn is doing. The URL for Ledn is ledn.io if you want to check them out, ledn.io. So really, this is just an attempt to bring some of this information to more of us so that we can all learn about the space. And again, not so that you jump into it, but just to be aware of what's happening. If you choose to go down this path and this rabbit hole, then at least you know what's out there. So long introduction. And let me just end off with this. This is not any sort of financial advice, this episode specifically. We're not advising anyone to do something. It's purely educational. Hopefully it's a bit of entertainment as well. But you got to do your own due diligence. Don't trust myself. Don't trust Nick. Don't trust anybody. Always do your own research. Never trust anything that you're hearing from us on this podcast. Always, do your own research before you dive into anything. I think that's super important. It gives you the confidence and conviction to stay with things longer as well. And so if you are listening to this and you do want some information from us specifically, we have a brand new app that you can get at ylytapp.com. And that app's available for iPhones and Androids. And it's one place where you can get all these podcast episodes. We put out a new Rockstar Minutes episode last week where we talk about, is inflation hiding in the shadows here in Canada and about to kind of come out with a vengeance or not? So we have a new Rockstar Minutes episode. You can get access to all those there as well. You can get access to all our reports, all our digital copies of our books on that app as well. So if you want a copy of the Your Life, Your Terms app, a copy. If you want the app, you can go to ylytapp.com. There'll be a link and a QR code there that you can get access to it directly. That's ylytapp.com. So that is available now. We're always updating it and putting new stuff on there, so you can check that out. That's enough for this intro. Let's get on with the show.
Are you ready to live life on your terms? Is it time to take charge? Real estate, business building, the economy, health and nutrition, and more. It's the Your Life, Your Term Show with Tom and Nick Carazza. Are you ready? Let's go.
Okay, we are live with Mauricio, who was one of the co-founders of Ledn.io. Mauricio, I'm not even going to try and say your last name. Can you please say your last name for us?
Yes, Di Bartolomeo.
Oh, Tom, I would like to hear you say that.
I need to be able to say that. So we totally appreciate you doing. We were just saying before we started recording, we have a lot of people who are very interested in what you have to say and what Ledn is doing, as I'm sure you can imagine. Just seeing how busy you were to get set up for this podcast, we totally appreciate it. So thank you.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to know that there are so many people interested in what we're doing and what we have to say. We've been doing this for 3 years. When we got started, people thought we were crazy. So it's definitely refreshing and great to see people kind of waking up to what it is that we do, the sort of the opportunity that it creates for people to really grow their wealth. So more than very, very happy to kind of explain and go through what we offer and what you can do with Ledn.
Yeah. And so I'm dying to ask you about that. Trust me, but I need to hear a bit about your story because you're from Venezuela. So how do you go from Venezuela? You get you just said you have a PhD in inflation because you lived in Venezuela, but then you come to you're in Canada doing this. Tell us a little bit about this journey.
Definitely. Yeah. It's a figurative PhD on inflation just because I grew up around it. So as to be repetitive for a second, I was born and raised in Venezuela. I was born in a small city called Barquisimeto, about 4 hours east of Caracas, which is the capital. It's a small town, but I guess the important part is that growing up, I had this infatuation, or I became obsessed with money and the monetary system, because growing up in Venezuela, you grew up basically with prices going up perpetually for things, a system where the government is very inefficient and does not collect taxes. And so to me, it started out as a question of me wanting to understand how a government that does not collect any taxes is able to sustain itself. And because it didn't make sense, I was like, well, where is the money coming from? And so that was really an obsession for me. And I got really interested in getting to know how money works. And after a lot of research and a lot of studying, you basically come to the realization that when the government doesn't have money, it just prints it. And when you print money, what you're really doing is you're doing a wealth transfer from people that don't have assets to the people that have assets. And it's basically a very large tax on the wealth, because when you print and you elevate the money supply, you are essentially skyrocketing the prices of assets. And if you're giving somebody a handout and that person doesn't have any assets, well, that handout is programmatically designed to worth less and less by the sheer virtue of the stimulus you're giving them. However, that same action causes asset prices to rise. This is exactly what we're seeing happen in the United States. Asset prices are through the roof. Main Street inflation is nowhere to be found. And what this creates is essentially a massive expansion of the wealth gap.
You know what? Hearing you talk about it and lived it, and then having to study it, it seems weird because in Canada we can just talk about that kind of thing, through theory or reading about Venezuela, and I think it seems very foreign to many of us. So
it's happening today. It's happening today right here. Like, how many normal Canadians? So you guys know this well. An average home in Toronto and Vancouver makes more money than the people living in it. Like, that's actually a stat. So what that tells me is homes are getting farther and farther away from people that don't own property because it's harder and harder increasingly to do the down payment. And the people that have the homes and have the second and the third and the fourth homes, well, their balance sheets are just... and so what this essentially, it creates a huge divide in the asset holders and the non-asset holders. Now, when you play this out at the early stages, it looks like it's very wealthy people trying to chase to basically protecting their wealth because they get the system. So they know where to go to hedge themselves from inflation. It's the people that don't have this. And historically, and this is why we were so excited about Bitcoin, historically, most assets that were desirable, that would be able to shelter their value, had incredibly high price tags. Like a home is an incredibly high price tag. Equity stocks are viable in North America and Europe. Like no other stock markets give the same assurances to their constituents. Like Venezuelan people don't own stocks in the Venezuela Stock Exchange. Colombian people don't own stock in Colombia. It's like same in Brazil. You name it. So until Bitcoin, your options were holding dollars was the kind of best you could do. But the dollar itself was designed to get weaker over time as well. So, but we just didn't think it would happen this fast. So what's happening right now is what Bitcoin has provided is people all over the world with a vehicle to essentially store their wealth and protect themselves from inflation.
When you were in Venezuela, and during those inflationary times, how did the black market, was there, I guess, the black market with the US dollar there? And I think, and how did that kind of operate? Because I think for a lot of people in Canada that maybe have only, haven't been exposed to that, they just don't they've never seen that. So they don't realize how things can change and how your lifestyle has to change accordingly when that type of stuff happens.
Yeah. So what typically happens, right? What typically happens in these situations, and I'll speak from my own experiences.
Sure.
But government comes in with a crazy plan that
like 1.9 trillion of stimulus.
Yeah.
Well, let's not even go that far. Let's go Chavez, right? I come in and I say, I want to rewrite the Constitution. I'm going to change the name of the country, change the time zone, change the flag. These are all facts. And naturally, the people that are, and it's basically setting the country up in the rails towards communism, like just one direction.
Sure.
And so when you look at that as a person that has worked their entire lives and has their life savings in a Venezuelan asset like property, and you're seeing farms and buildings get expropriated on TV, like by Chavez saying, who's in that building? That used to belong to Simón Bolívar's uncle. Expropriated, and that's how things were getting expropriated in Venezuela. So people look at this naturally and they freak, and they say, my entire life's work can get expropriated like that. And so what starts happening is people say, okay, I'm going to sell this and park it away from your hands, right? So they would say, I'm going to list my farm for sale. I want to get bolívares. I'm going to convert them into dollars, and I'm going to send them to Florida. Okay. Now the government says, wait a second, guys. Like, why are you guys buying so many dollars? Why don't you want to hold our hot potato bolívares that we're giving you? And investors are like, because we don't want to. We don't trust your plan. We don't like your plan, frankly. And so the government says, too bad, so sad. You can't buy dollars. And so what does the economy do in those situations more times than not? well, you can't control that. You can't control a person's desire to hold dollars. You can try to make them very difficult, but you can't stop them. So what ends up happening is you sold your farm, you got $100,000 worth of equivalent bolívares. The government won't sell you dollars, right? But you happen to, because you're wealthy, you have a bank account in Bank of America, let's say. And so Miguel, your neighbor, happens to have a need to get bolívares because he needs to pay something else. And so you say, Miguel, I will transfer you these bolívares if you transfer me your dollars from your Wells Fargo account to my Bank of America account. And we create a trade. That is what we be considered the black market.
Just hearing like how sheltered, if you're born in this country, how sheltered are you? Like, think about what Mauricio is just saying there. That's just crazy. If you're born and raised in Canada.
Well, you always have to see in Canada, we don't have to play the game, right? You don't have to always.
We're having to play the game right now.
You haven't had to.
Yeah, we have, but we're having to right about now.
Whereas there, you had, it was daily. You had to be on your toes, which is kind of like it is now. But it was moving so quickly, right? And that's the crazy part. So you got into Bitcoin how long you been here for?
So I came to Canada when Chavez came into Venezuela in 2000. He came into Venezuela. My family, along with others, decided to make the effort to spend some time outside of Venezuela for a few years. So we went to Miami, like a lot of Venezuelan families did at the time. Spent a couple of years there. But while there, it was very difficult for my dad to manage his business remotely. Obviously, the Venezuelan legal system and all these things don't work the same. It was 20 years ago, so there was not as many remote work tools around. So it was very difficult. And he was having a hard time basically managing his business from abroad. And my family, we didn't want to get basically separated. So we made the decision to go back to Venezuela after the 2 years in Florida. I was basically in my graduating year. So this was 2002 in Venezuela. And so in Venezuela, you finish high school in grade 11. And so when I finished, I had really enjoyed my experience in Miami. And I kind of had an inkling that Venezuela wasn't really going to head down the right direction. And Chavez wouldn't be this passing thing that people thought it would be. So I really wanted to go back to North America for school. And I happened to have a relative here in Toronto that my dad knew really well. And he said, instead of trying to go for school in Miami, why don't you go check out Canada and see if you like it there? So I came to Canada. I applied I went to the, bunch of universities, tried to apply for my role. And they said, for my degree, and they said that this year is the double cohort year. So we have 2 years. We have 2 years graduating this year. So better luck next time, go back. And so I'm like, okay, thank you. And then they basically said the only way you would do this is if you did a year of high school in Canada and you somehow beat the Canadian kids to get into school in this double cohort year. And I'm like, okay, well, if you guys put it that way, it doesn't seem like you guys want me that bad. So I'm just going to pack up my stuff and go. And so as I was packing up my stuff, I forget exactly what it is that broke out in Venezuela, but like, military took the streets, like things got really nasty. There was a massive protest. And so my dad calls me up that night and he goes, listen, man, I know you haven't really enjoyed your experience in those universities that you visited so far, but you can't come back. He's like, honestly, like, don't come back. And so do whatever you need, but you need to stay. And so I'm like, not the happiest at that time. I'm like, well, I guess I have to stick with it. And so serendipitously, the next morning I woke up, the building that I was staying at my aunt's place happened to have a high school in front of it. And so I said, you know what, these things don't typically happen for no reason. So I crossed the street and it was sometime in September, I think early October. It was like the year had already started, but this school was amazing. It's actually the York School in Toronto. And I was able to do my grade 11. And from there, I did get into university. And I essentially got into the Ivy program at Western, which to me is a program that I have a great deal of admiration for.
Not easy to get into either. So you did well.
Yeah, it's not easy to get into. Yeah. And so that's where I met Adam, who became my best friend and is now co-founder of Ledn. Also Ken, another member of our team. So there's a lot of our team today actually comes from having gone to university at Western. And so Adam and I stayed in touch after school. We were very good friends. So I took a job actually doing sales and marketing at a real estate developer in Toronto for a few years. And my dad kept trying to pull me back to Venezuela because now oil had been rallying and there was a lot of good business opportunities down there. So he was always trying to get me to go work with him. I was always trying to get them to understand that this was just a passing thing and that they should be leaving Venezuela. So there was this tug of war. You know, I went there to do a couple of projects with him. And then Chavez dies. So Chavez dies in 2013. And the entire Venezuelan population was like, okay, we're done this nightmare. Like, let's go into a fair election. Let's forget about this guy and all the damage he did. Let's get a new person in place. So many Venezuelans got very excited. I flew down along with many expats. I still remember the plane rides into Venezuela. Like everybody had their like hats on for like their the not dictatorial political party. I guess is the best way to describe it. So I land in Venezuela. Election happens. The Communist Party, for lack of a better word, essentially steals the election, and like very flagrantly steals the election. And so the collective sigh in Venezuela that day, I still remember it, and I still remember the plane ride out. It was devastating. And that's when a lot of Venezuela, so that kicked off this sort of massive exodus wave in Venezuela, when people essentially saw that happen. And that's when people started like leaving anywhere they could. Like they started listing things for sale. So the inflation started just skyrocketing. The businesses start shutting down en masse. And right around this time, I'm the older of three brothers. My youngest brother graduates university. And back then, my dad, the way we had set it up was that my dad was a very entrepreneurial guy. So every time one of us graduated school, he's like, pitch me and I'll do a little seed check if I like your idea. So you can go take your stab at your first thing, right? So I had pitched and I had done my thing. It didn't go so well. My brother had pitched, he'd done his thing, and he was doing okay, my middle brother. And now it was my youngest brother's turn, but it was a different Venezuela, like completely different. And he didn't want to leave. But my dad didn't want to actually enable a business that would force him to stay because he really kind of wanted him to keep his options open and leave. So my brother starts pitching us on these ideas. And a lot of them were like, too risky. Eventually, he pitches us on this thing called mining Bitcoin. And this was, I think it was mid or early 2014. And my dad sends me this thing because I'd gone to business school. And he's like, you're the finance guy. What does this look like to you? And that's when I first read about Bitcoin. And I'm like, wow. I mean, my first impression was, sounds interesting, perhaps a little too good to be true. But when I started understanding what mining was, how it interacted with the network, it was pretty much a necessity for the Bitcoin network to run. And then I saw the biggest input cost being electricity, which was highly subsidized in Venezuela. And I saw there was a market for Bitcoin everywhere in the world. So I'm like, this seems, out of the stuff he's pitched, like this seems like probably the best thing, right? Because it seems like it's kind of global. You can do it here, but then move elsewhere if it goes well. So, let's let him run. And so he gets his little seed check. He gets his first mining machines. And I'm still in Canada while this is happening. So I fly back to Venezuela for Christmas later that year. And I'm like talking to all my friends. All my friends are like depressed. Their dad's business are shutting down, all this stuff, like planning to leave. Like, where are you going? And where are you going? Are the conversations, right? And then my brother just walks in, like smile ear to ear. Like he's the happiest kid on the block. And I'm like, what? I guess, how's it going? Like, tell me a little more about your machines. And he's like, come check them out. And he had double the machines. And I'm like, what do you, so I went to my dad actually before I even confronted him, because I'm like, Dad, did this thing go badly? And you just like wrote him a check for more machines? Like, what's going on? And he's like, no, he repaid me Like, that's all him. And I'm like, okay. So I go to my brother and I'm like, what are you really doing? Like, and he's like, let me show you. And so he's like, can you give me your Banesco bank account, which is my bank, Venezuela back then? And I'm like, here's my Banesco bank account. He's like, I'm going to sell this Bitcoin here right now on this exchange, and you're going to get the bolívares hitting your account within the next 2 hours. Okay. I'm just going to show you that you can sell Bitcoin into real bolívares. And I'm like, okay, show me. And he goes, click. And then within the hour, boom, I had the bolívares in my bank account. And that's when like all the light bulbs went off for me. I was just like, I'm like, what am I missing? Like, what is this? So I essentially stopped everything I was doing and went through the proverbial rabbit hole that everybody is now well familiar with. Sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No. This story, it's a great story. Keep going.
So I'm deep into the rabbit hole, and I have to catch my plane to Toronto. And I'm like, but I don't want to go to Toronto. I don't have free power there. Like, what am I going to do? I can't mine the way they are. I can't do the same things they're doing. But I could research, I could read, I could talk to people here that were into this scene. My wife got really mad about me talking about Bitcoin, and she's like, go talk to someone else about it. And so I ended up going to
I think everybody's wife goes through that moment, right? Can you just stop talking about Bitcoin?
And she goes, why don't you go to some meetups, right? And so I started going to some meetups, and it just so happened that Ethereum was being developed in Toronto. And Vitalik and Ethan and all those guys were like giving their presentations at UFT rooms for free. And so I started going to these meetups and asking them about mining Ethereum and how Ethereum works, and start connecting the dots. I'm like, brilliant people in Toronto spending time developing technology, amazing guys in Venezuela buying infrastructure and building security, like infrastructure that secures the network. The people that are making those machines are in China. There's huge interest of this in like Russia and Europe. And I'm like, okay, this is a global thing. And so for mining, then we started helping a lot of people mine, because that's what we knew how to do. So we were like, let me help you get set up. And so Venezuelans were like calling us nonstop to like help them get one miner, put it in their house, like, because a miner back then was making like $300 to $400 a month. That was 10 times a salary in Venezuela. And so,
and was the energy input cost in Venezuela subsidized? So it was just cheap energy for you guys?
Tremendously. Yeah. The government subsidizes a lot of things. That's why they stay in power. But essentially people found a way to take this subsidy and use it to their advantage to escape this treacherous monetary policy regime that they were under. And we started helping people how to mine. And then people start kind of coming to us and being like, hey guys, man, if I would just been able to hold on to that Bitcoin that I sold to pay for my miner that takes 6 months to arrive, the opportunity cost of selling Bitcoin to buy anything back then was just so high. Like, it was just not worth it. So as a Bitcoin business, it was really frustrating, because the only way to grow was to sell your profits in Bitcoin. And when you did that costed you more. Like, if you would have just held on to the Bitcoin, you would almost make more money than the business itself. So it was really, you had to be able to do both. You had to be able to maintain ownership of your Bitcoin and reinvest into your business. That was happening for miners, exchanges, brokerages, you name it. Anybody that had Bitcoin profits or revenue and had fiat expenses that wanted to fuel growth was in the same predicament. So at this point, I'm in Canada now. I've helped build a lot of mines around Venezuela and even some in the US. And I'm in Toronto, and I start trying to basically get Adam excited about Bitcoin. So I'm like, Adam, and the reason I did that, because Adam had spent like the last 10 years of his life financing renewable energy infrastructure in Canada. So he knew where cheap power was. So he was my energy friend. So I was like, Adam, where is the cheapest power in the world? And he goes, Quebec. and so I'm like, okay, that's close enough. I'm like, we start running some numbers. We're like, let's build a demo mine in Canada and essentially show investors what this can do. And then we can build a bigger mine. So as we're building the mine, we're running into the same issue. We're like, man, like, the big problem is not the mine or the infrastructure. The big problem here is financing your Bitcoin. And we both came from, structured finance backgrounds. We kind of knew what it took to talk to a pension fund, et cetera, to finance energy structure deals. And I knew how to communicate to Bitcoiners why they shouldn't sell their Bitcoin, especially in light of this new existing product, if we ever created it. So we said, okay, what do we need to build this? We need a great team. Like, we need a team of people. We need a CTO, we need legals, we need compliance. And so we basically put a project together, and we started rallying a team. And we pitched this idea to our good friend, Mina, who was working at RBC at the time and running their, a big part of their treasury operations. And we pitched him on it, and he says, I love it. It's like, I want to join you guys. And we're like, okay, great. We have a CTO, and he brought with him a great group of devs. And then Anton, who was also very early on, he was a friend that we met through Adam. He was actually one of the first blockchain developers ever. He started out in Toronto working, I think it was BlockGeeks. No, it wasn't BlockGeeks. I forget the name of the shop, but essentially he was one of the very first Ethereum developers. And so he knew blockchain in and out. He decided to join us. Then Carlos, our chief compliance, was working at BMO. He decides to join us to do compliance. So we're like, okay, we have a solid team. Let's go raise some money. We got investors that were really willing to back our project. So we raised our first $1.5 million. That was September 2018.
The investors, wow. I don't want to cut you off. This is amazing, by the way. This is great. But I'm just curious, did the investors, plus we gave you a chance to take a break. So, but was there pushback? Like, how easy was it to raise that initial capital? Or were there questions still then of what you guys were doing? Like, was it, because in that finance space, was there still a lot of people thinking like, what are these guys up to? It was this crypto crap,
There was a lot of skepticism because back then there were two types of investors in this space. There was token investors, people that just wanted to flip your token, do an ICO.
Oh, that was like the ICO era, right?
Yeah. So there were the guys that wanted you to have a token, and that was the only way they would invest in you. And then there was the guys that didn't understand what we were doing. So there were two groups. So we had to educate essentially a group of investors that we knew really well from previous careers. They actually, Adam had a really good relationship with them. So they believed in us more so than they believed in Bitcoin. And so they basically said, we think what you guys are up to is a very interesting, we were both leaving like great careers to come do this. So we were definitely like, we had a lot of conviction in what we wanted to build. And so I think this was in a way really helpful, because although they weren't perhaps fully aware of the potential or what it is that we were really doing to do, they believed that we were people that, that they would be willing to back. And that our team and the plan that we had in place was a project that they would be willing to back. And so with that, after we raised our first round, we essentially started building on the platform. We underwrote Canada's first Bitcoin-backed loan in November 2018.
Very cool. Congratulations. That's super
thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you. So it was actually to a really prominent Bitcoin brokerage at the time. So that kind of let the world know that we existed and that people that are industry experts were interested in using our product. So that was kind of our first introduction to the market in Canada. So from there, our Bitcoin-backed loan was our first product. And from there, we started seeing that a lot of our clients that didn't need a loan were very interested in earning interest on their Bitcoin. They didn't just want to hold it in cold storage. They thought, is there any way that I can put this asset to work so that it could generate something for me? And we started seeing a lot of interest from institutions to borrow some more of Bitcoin that we had. So we said, well, why don't we create a product that lets people earn interest on their Bitcoin? And we essentially lend out the Bitcoin to world-class institutions that can have a use for it, and they can pay an interest, and then we collect the spread. So we launched the Bitcoin savings account. That was Canada's first Bitcoin savings account too. And that was May 2019.
So great. So keep going, because I have questions about each of what your kind of lines of business here, but I don't know if you're just naturally going to describe them. So keep going.
Yeah, no, we can get into them later. And then after we had the savings account, we noticed that a lot of our clients were getting a loan, getting the proceeds, going to buy more Bitcoin with the proceeds, bringing back the Bitcoin, getting another loan, taking those proceeds, going to buy more Bitcoin, and so on and so forth until they hit the minimum loan amount. And after enough time seeing this, we said, okay, people clearly want to use this. Why are we creating this really awkward user experience if that's how they want to use our product? Can we create a product that takes the Bitcoin you have, creates automatically a loan for the same amount and doubles your Bitcoin, keeps the two in our custody while the loan that we lent you to buy that extra Bitcoin is repaid. And so that became our B2X product, in which today is our most popular product. It's our most popular loan product. And then from there, we started seeing a lot of clients in Latin America and other parts of the world request savings alternatives in stablecoins. And they, a lot of them started asking to receive the loan disbursements in stablecoins. Then they started saying, "Can I earn interest on these stablecoins?" And we saw a great opportunity to do that because there's a lot of appetite for stablecoin lending in our space. And so we launched a USDC savings account. And
why in Latin America did they want the stable coins? That, if I just think this through, I guess this is just an easier way for them to get out of their local currency.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is a very interesting proposition when it's going up and to the right, right? But there are times in Bitcoin's cycles where it's flat lines for a little bit or even comes down for a little bit. And it's in these particular periods that people don't like to be, they want to have the option of not having to be all in on Bitcoin.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, so that was kind of the natural evolution of the products and where we are today. And well, I mentioned, I forgot to mention, we just recently did two things that we're very proud of. One, we closed an investment round with groups like White Star Capital, Coinbase Ventures, Darrow Holdings, which is a subsidiary of Susquehanna, Global Founders Capital, Kingsway Digital, CMT. So, very like a really, we think a roster of really great investors that bring a lot of expertise to the products and the parts of the world we want to go to. And then the other piece that we're equally proud of is where we became the first lender ever to do a proof of reserves attestation. So we work with Armanino LLP, they're an accounting and consulting firm out of the US and public accounting. And they basically worked with us to take a look at what we owed clients, what were we doing with those assets, making sure that everything matched and that our assets match our liabilities and they were in excess of. So all of our clients today can actually go in, all of our clients with a balance as of January 31st, they have a unique hashed ID that they can take to the Armanino website and basically verify that what they had on their balance as at the end of January matches exactly with what Armanino saw and observed during the attestation.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I don't know if I'm speaking correctly using the right financial terms here, but I think there's a lot of talk about certain institutions rehypothecating or taking some of the reserves and doing other things with the reserves, and you don't really know what's behind the closed door or behind the curtain there. So that's cool that you guys are doing that. And that's why you're doing that, to answer that question, correct?
Yeah, it's really to ensure that we hold as much Bitcoin as we say we do and as we owe our clients. Really, it's about basically coming in, looking at our lending operations, looking at our trading operations, looking at our custody, adding all those three things together and make sure they add up to more than what our clients have on the platform. So it's really about showing that we are able to meet our obligations to our clients.
This is just a crazy journey. What a story. And this is like the first inning for you. This is the top of the first for you. This is, so congrats on everything so far. I mean, there's going to be a wild, exciting road ahead. And there's a couple of key things, Nick, that just stood out for me when Mauricio was speaking here is that when he said in Venezuela, how the people were making the trade from the local currency to the US dollars, and with those two neighbors or two friends were doing that, it just reminded me of that a country can ban something. So like a lot of Canadians, Mauricio talked to us and say, well, maybe Canada will ban Bitcoin. Like that's kind of fading now, but I think 3 months ago, that was like really high up there for everybody. And I think the way to frame that is that a country can ban Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can't be banned. So like if Canada's going to choose not to participate in Bitcoin, I guess Canada could do all kinds of crazy regulations and stuff like that. I guess they could, but you're never going to get Bitcoin completely banned because it's so distributed. So there's always going to be a way. Right. And I know you don't want to hear that operating Ledn. I'm just throwing that thought out there because I know we get asked that a lot. So I just wanted to address it, that you can never really shut this thing down.
No. And I think a perfect example to that is the what's happening in the Central Bank of Nigeria. So the Central Bank of Nigeria just came out literally last week and said, they tried to ban it, but I think it was, I'm not sure if it was the president of the central bank or someone very high up in the central bank came out in a press release and said, we can't stop it. Like we actually can't we can't stop this. We can't regulate it. We can't stop it. Like even though we want to, there's physically no way to stop it. And that's essentially what happened in Venezuela. Like the Venezuelan regime tried to make dollars illegal, but you can't do that. People find a way to basically get in and out of dollars. And if you ban dollars, they'll start buying rice. And if you ban rice, they'll start buying tires and stocking those up. And then if they ban tires, they'll do tuna. And so it's
totally. Yeah. So when you hear me say that, because I want to ask you questions about your products, because I know, and your services, because I know we have a ton of interest in that. When you hear people say that about banning, but then you have direct exposure to investors who are investing in your business, what are you hearing in those conversations? Is that even a concern anymore in Canada? Because if people are coming to you, giving you that type of investment, they must have thought this through.
I mean, they have. And I think to your point, like this concept of Bitcoin is used for criminals or Bitcoin is used for illicit activity. You can't really say that when, BlackRock is in it, and when Tesla has it on its balance sheet, and when Square has it on its balance sheet, and when the Chicago Mercantile Exchange lists Bitcoin futures and Ethereum futures. Like as more of these things happen, it becomes very, very hard to say that. Like you have a Norwegian oil company spinning up a Bitcoin infrastructure fund for $50 million. The things that are happening, you have US bank charter licenses being given to crypto companies. Like the legitimization of this space is happening in real time. And I think what governments are trying to grapple with, it's a couple of things. Like it's a big can of worms, but most of the restrictions that are out there are trying to prevent people from doing what they want if this goes in the opposite direction of the government. So a perfect example would be the Venezuelan government would not want somebody that does not like their model to sell their farm, to collect dollars, push inflation up, and send those dollars to Florida. They don't want that. So they make it hard for you to do that. And what that actually is saying is, I don't trust this government, I trust that government. So I'm going to take it from here and send it to over there. So the governments that are on the receiving end of this capital, which are developed markets, have an implied vested interest in this thing doing its thing.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Because it brings assets from everywhere else to here. The people that typically have the issue with this is the people whose assets are leaving. And so it's a bit of a game, because you're starting to see countries like the US saying Bitcoin's great. Like, bring it on. Like it's phenomenal. And that probably will continue to happen in markets that are benefiting from this. In the markets that are not, but they're not benefiting from this because they're not benefiting from this because they're actually trying to hurt their own people, and their own people are voting with their wallets and saying, we don't like you, we're taking our money elsewhere. So what this, I think, will end up doing is it'll create this competitiveness amongst governments to create an inviting framework without these restrictions. Because the way in the past, the way you've been able to create these things are through punishing. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift in that countries are going to start now saying, okay, I want to lure Bitcoiners. How do I lure Bitcoiners? Let's create a legal framework so you can have a Bitcoin company. Let's create tax breaks for people that come in and hire people to develop blockchain technology. Like, let's make ourselves a leader in this space. So this is happening in jurisdictions like Malta, Estonia, like countries that are basically seeing an opportunity, even Portugal, and even I would argue the United States. It's a bit dicier down there, but it's way clearer than in Canada as far as the framework. And so we always
lag up here. We like to America to do its thing, and then we'll decide after the US decides what it's going to do, then we kind of copy. That's the history of Canada's.
And you don't become a leader like that. No, like, unfortunately, and you have to take bold action to become a leader. And I think that won't happen if we just want to wait and copy. So,
well, it's cool that you're doing what you're doing up here. So let's get into it. So we're going to start with, we'll end with your most popular product, but the savings product. So for most people, they don't get it. How does this work? Because on your website, it says Bitcoin, if you deposit Bitcoin, you can earn 6% and USDC 12.5%. Can you just explain?
Correct.
Yeah. How does that work? What am I doing? I own some Bitcoin. And then what is happening for me to earn this?
Of course. So there's the simple answer, and then there's a little bit more complicated answer, or not complicated, but the more detailed answer as to what the mechanics of how it works. In simple terms, you have a Bitcoin that you want to put to work and you want to generate some interest in it. You can send it to Ledn into your Bitcoin savings account. What we do there is we aggregate Bitcoins to an amount that an institution would take, because an institution won't take 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoins. They'll take it in the hundreds of Bitcoins, thousands of Bitcoins. So we aggregate essentially a clip that is institutional bite size, and we lend it to our institutional lending partners. In this case, is Genesis Capital. So Genesis is the most established institution. They are the guys that they own Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, DCG does, and so they own CoinDesk. They have investments pretty much everywhere. So they are the institution with the most trajectory and most well respected in the space. And they publish quarterly lending reports of what they do with their Bitcoin and their activity. So they work with like the top 60 counterparties in the space. And what we do is essentially we take the Bitcoin that we receive and we lend it to Genesis. And Genesis pays us an interest. We pay interest to our clients and we take the difference. It's quite simple. Why are people borrowing Bitcoin? That's probably the follow-on question.
Correct.
Great. There's this huge misconception that people are borrowing Bitcoin just to short it. That is, you can look at the short interest on Bitfinex right now. You can see as a historical lows. Like nobody's shorting Bitcoin right now. You'd be fool to be shorting Bitcoin right now. So the use case primarily is not to short Bitcoin. There is an element of borrows that goes into that, but it's a very small fraction relative to the universe of Bitcoin lending. The majority of the Bitcoin trades would go or still go to market neutral strategies, and by market price neutral strategies. And what I mean by that is our strategies that are not dependent on the price of Bitcoin moving in one direction or another. And what such trade could that be? So a good example of that would be arbing out the premium in a closed Bitcoin fund, in a traded closed Bitcoin fund. So for example, there are funds in Canada that are trading at a discount to their net asset value. So, and there are funds in the US that trade at a premium to their net asset value. So in both of these situations, in a discount situation, you can buy the units and then redeem the Bitcoin and collect the difference. And or in a case where it's trading at a premium, you could contribute the units, convert it, cash out, rebuy the Bitcoin, collect the delta, right? So in both of those situations, you're in a way Bitcoin price neutral. What your variable becomes there is the size of the premium or the discount, because that can move depending on your lockup periods.
So the institutional investors are using the Bitcoin coming from you as almost access to some Bitcoin liquidity to then do their institutional maneuvers and stuff that I think we would all like to do, but they're doing it at scale. They're doing it at scale and they're kind of arbitraging that price difference. And to do it, they need access to some Bitcoin. And you're offering that to them. So the deposits that an individual might make goes into that pool. You're getting paid a return for that activity. The depositor gets 6% and you're taking the spread.
That's correct. And what, another price neutral trade that's perhaps maybe a little bit easier to understand is the futures, the basis trade on the futures. So like the carry basis trade, and they call it a carry trade for the following reason. Typically, a contract for Bitcoin delivery in June trades at a higher price than Bitcoin today. Okay. What you do as a trader, if say June Bitcoin is 5% over spot, well, if it's 5% between now and June, you annualize that, that's 10% gross, right? Because you basically have to carry the Bitcoin until you deliver it in June. That's why it's called the carry trade. And so what traders do is they'll say, okay, sell future, sell June future, buy spot, sit tight, deliver in June, collect delta. It doesn't really matter what Bitcoin does because it's the contracts are in Bitcoin terms. So essentially you're hedged in the basis trade. And that's why it's a popular trade. So those are the types of activities that typically people borrow Bitcoin to do. The other one is
that trade you just described. and I've never done such a thing. That trade you just described seems like a very interesting proposition to any trader.
But you need massive scale to do this.
Yeah.
For example,
No, I could see that. So it would be big institutions doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the traders must be just going nuts on that. Anyway, sorry. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, no, and that's really it. Like in the other one is like most large market makers or OTC desks, a lot of them don't want to hold their balance sheet in all Bitcoin. Like they'll have a Bitcoin element to it, but they're benchmarked in dollar terms. So they have to make sure that they have visibility on their dollars. So they want Bitcoin. They want to have thousands of Bitcoins for somebody that shows up and says, I'm going to buy 10,000 Bitcoins. I'm going to wire the money now, but I need you to show me that you have the Bitcoin at hand. And so a lot of these guys don't want to carry thousands of Bitcoins on balance sheet because of the volatility in their balance sheet, frankly. And so what they do is they say, hey, I'm going to put this cash as collateral and borrow this Bitcoin because I know what I'm going to, basically I'm hedged if Bitcoin prices goes down, right? Because I already put this collateral. You're not going to margin call me when Bitcoin price goes down. You're going to margin call me when Bitcoin price goes up. So in a way, you hedge yourself from the volatility of holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet if you're using it just as inventory, right? And so that's another big use case for Bitcoin Borrow.
Okay, got it. And then as the end user, Nick, I'm going to keep going. Jump in if you need to. As the end user, I then am giving up my keys, right? Like I don't have control. It's going into your custody. I know you said you're audited, right? Which is very comforting, but that is something that everybody should know. That's part of the process, right? And it's like any other kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a bank account, but your savings accounts, any like bank account, I can take it back at any time. Is that how it works?
That is correct. And yes, we are a custodial service. So you would be essentially giving us control of your keys while you're using our services.
Okay. And in the 6%, if I give you Bitcoin, am I paid that 6% in Bitcoin?
Yes. Everything is in Bitcoin, calculated in Bitcoin terms.
Oh, okay. And then the USDC example, if I give you Bitcoin, am I paid in USDC if I choose that? Or no, I'm giving you USDC to be paid in USDC.
Yeah. So each account gets paid in its native currency.
Okay. Got it. For some reason, I wasn't clear. Thank you. Okay.
That's a request we get often. And it's not something that we're building right now. It's people that, they have a Bitcoin balance. They want to get their interest paid in USDC, or their USDC balance, their interest, they want to convert it into Bitcoin. So one of the pieces that we're working on right now actually is the trade feature within Ledn. So once you get paid your dollars, you can go in and buy your Bitcoin if you choose. And if you get paid your Bitcoin and you want to go to dollars, you'll be able to do that at Ledn as well.
Okay. And then the interest rate in USDC is just higher at 12.5% instead of 6% because the trades are making that much more money. We don't have to go into the details, but I guess just similar things to you described. It's just the interest rates are much higher.
Yes, because you can use dollars to buy more Bitcoin. And so that is what a lot of people want right now. And that's why the demand for dollars is predominantly to buy more Bitcoin. And that is a thirst that is very hard to quench right now.
Got it. So you can charge the higher rate because the demand isn't like, I don't want to say insatiable, but it's incredible for that. Got it. Makes sense.
It's not insatiable, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. I guess for some individuals, it might be insatiable. Okay. And then on your website, so I give up custody to the key of my keys to you, but I can take them back at any time. And that's just from logging into my account. I can say, I want to take my Bitcoin back. And then I guess the interest payment's cut off. Do I have to wait to the end of a month or something like that? Like, is there a minimum time frame for that?
No, you can withdraw at any time. You could just go into your website and submit a withdrawal. Very similar to how you send the money or how you send the Bitcoin into Ledn. You see your balance. You have the option to essentially withdraw. You put in your destination address, and off you go.
Okay, and then who is BitGo?
BitGo is the world's first qualified custodian in the U.S. or in the world, really, to custody digital assets. So they are probably the most established custodian in the space.
And that's who you use to custody? Is that like the BitGo is the custodial service that Ledn uses?
Yes, we don't custody Bitcoin or USDC directly. We use a third-party custodian, regulated, fully registered custodian in the US. And that's where, so when you send your Bitcoin to your Ledn savings account, it lands at BitGo Cold Storage. At BitGo Cold Storage, then we basically aggregate all the Bitcoin, as I mentioned, to kind of like the institutional bite size. And then we then tranche it off to our institutional partners. Okay.
And this might be a very naive question, so I apologize in advance. But when you're audited for the amount of Bitcoin that you have on hand, is it then auditing Ledn or BitGo?
It's Ledn's account at BitGo. It's
Okay.
basically Ledn's lending agreements. It's Ledn's balances in any active partner. Anywhere we have Bitcoin or USDC, they'll have to look at.
Okay, got it. And then if I want to borrow from you, how does that work? And what's the loan to, I guess I'm just thinking in real estate terms, but map it out for me. How much do I have to give you to get it? What's the loan to value? How does that work if I want to borrow from you? If I come to you with 1 Bitcoin, what do I get back? Or use any example you'd like.
Yeah, definitely. So let's use Bitcoin today trading at 50K. So our loans go out at 50% loan to value. So if you have a Bitcoin today that's worth $50,000 and you come to Ledn, you can borrow $25,000. And what you do is you essentially send the Bitcoin to your loan address. That's where it stays as collateral while the loan remains open. We will wire you the dollars within 24 hours or USDC, and you have a 1-year term to pay it. And you can repay at any time. There's no early repayment penalties. We don't ask you to send monthly interest payments. All the interest payments and fees are collected until the day you choose to repay. And our interest rate is 1% per month. You only pay interest for the days you have the loan open, and we have a 2% origination fee.
Okay, got it. And so then you don't pay the interest payments every month. You just pay when you want to get your Bitcoin or your collateral back. Correct. So when I want my Bitcoin back and you're holding the keys, so it's like, I better pay, otherwise I'm not getting this thing back.
Yeah, that's the security that we have.
Of course, that makes sense. And then if the value, and then when do I get called for more collateral? Is there a percentage? Like if the Bitcoin price drops, when does that call happen? And how much time do I have to react?
Yes. So the call happens when LTV reaches 70%. So that equates to about a 29% drop on the spot price of Bitcoin from when you got it. That's when the first requirement for additional collateral goes out. We send another one at 75% LTV. And if we don't receive any Bitcoin, or if the system doesn't receive any Bitcoin in the system and LTV reaches 80%, then the system goes into selling the necessary amount of Bitcoin to repay the loan and then return whatever balance remains to the client.
Okay, so then about a month ago, when Bitcoin had about a 30% drop, I want to say in US dollars, it went from 40 something to like right around 30 or 29. That must have been an interesting time then for you.
Yeah, right? But I'm happy to say this. So far this year, we've had no liquidations. All of our clients have stayed on top of their loans. We are very proactive. The last thing we want is to close loans and to basically have this happen to our clients, because obviously we make money off of loans, and everybody comes to us because they want more Bitcoin, not less. So we do our best essentially to make sure that we're giving our clients as much notice as we can and making the process as intuitive and as simple as we can during the situation. So what we've started doing is in volatile market conditions, our clients that are having loans with LTVs that are getting even close to that, we start sending them a loan management email. So that it's basically a play-by-play on how to top up your loan before or after or during a margin call. Basically, it's a bit of a primer on how to protect yourself. And our clients are really smart. I'll say getting to the point where you understand the value of not selling your Bitcoin and that taking dollars, that's a rather, I would say not the simplest thing to get through. And when you do that, you have a pretty decent understanding of how this thing works. So you basically, we want to give them all the tools that they may need to essentially protect themselves.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. So when I'm just kind of thinking out loud. So if the price was dropping, I'm getting alerts from you. So basically it's like any situation. You just don't want to borrow where you have no liquidity in your life, that if it was to drop, you can't come up with more collateral on that. And I use the example of 1 Bitcoin. That it doesn't, is there a minimum to borrow? Could you borrow $5,000, $1,000? Is there a minimum on the borrowing?
Yeah, so our loans start at $500. So the lowest you could take would be putting up $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to take out $500.
It's almost a good way for someone to learn if they've never done this and never, put something up. Like it might be a good way to get into it. I'm sure someone's going to hate me for saying that they borrow their, but no,
it's just but to understand because I'm sitting here. The reason I've been quiet for 20 minutes because I'm just sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking about this, and it's just, from the outside looking in, as someone that really
I know what you're going to say.
I just really got into it, about a year ago, right? That really started investigating the space, was aware of it, kind of glanced at it a little bit, but to see the infrastructure that's being built out around in this space, it's mind boggling, like the speed. And I think that's one of the things that we I forget when we first kind of heard this or how we started coming about. We're like, there's so much, not just smart money, but smart people going into the space. So like yourself, Maurizio, like when, yourself and the people that you surround yourself, the good team you found, and all the guys that you were, in Toronto and elsewhere that you were kind of working with early on, it's like, there's all this brain power going in to build up this thing. It's the amount of resources that are focused in this area is mind boggling. And you can see as to why the value of this area, it's not just the price of Bitcoin, right? Which is, and I know we're in the middle of the halving cycle and there's all this stuff going on, but with that much resource and power being put towards it, there's some logic to why the value is where it is. It's not just this, it's nothing. It's the value of the human capital, and the knowledge that's being put into it is being transferred and kept in that asset. That's the way I look at it. So listening to you, I was just, my mind was just thinking about all this different stuff.
We're witnessing the construction of a brand new financial system in front of our eyes. Like we're talking to Maurizio here at Ledn. Sorry, Maurizio, we're talking about you like you're not here now. But like it's like we're witnessing the birth of a brand new financial system, and then there's these gateways that go between the old system and the new system. Like and I know some people listening are going to think, Tom, you've completely lost it. The old system's not going away, and I'm like, I'm not so sure about that.
Well, maybe it doesn't go away, but it changes.
It definitely changes.
Let me blow your mind for a second. So, as a Colombian client, before Bitcoin, if you wanted to access credit, the only way you could access credit was through a Colombian lender, because a Colombian lender would need to take either security on an asset that you had or unsecured credit history on your Colombian SIN number or your Colombian X. That doesn't exist, by the way, outside of developed markets. There is no credit score for unsecured credit. It's either you have assets and you know people at the bank, or you don't, and you don't get a loan. Bitcoin, for the first time ever, allowed a person in Colombia or Canada or Brazil to essentially have an asset that a lender anywhere in the world can take security on and finance. The best part of my job is when I get questions or comments from people that reach out to us, clients directly, that say, you are the first loan I've ever been approved for. To me, that's everything. Like, that is everything. And if you look around, most of our competitors start loans at $10,000, $5,000. In Mexico, you can buy a house with the amount of collateral you need to take out that loan. So the $500 was very much by design, because we wanted this product to be inclusive beyond investor markets. If we took this product to Mexico and we had a $10,000 minimum loan, people would be like, great, but I'm not, Warren Buffett. Like, I don't have $20,000 worth of Bitcoin. If I did, I would buy a house. And so we needed to make these products more usable for people that really, really needed them, right? Like a Canadian person that has, Canadians have ample options to finance. North America's all the ones you want. Somebody in Colombia that is trying to collect savings because they want a better future for themselves and doesn't have access to fixed income or stock or anything, and then it slowly starts chipping away $50 at $50, they get to $1,000. A $500 loan from Ledn can be life-changing. And so to us, that is incredibly fulfilling. And the other piece that sounds crazy is that one of the things we wanted to do from very early on was to make this product available to I don't want to say my people, but like Latin Americans, like people that we knew were suffering from inflation left, right, and center, and like their whole lives revolve around escaping inflation. When this is happening to you, you have no time to learn English. You have no time to go and read the white paper. You're too busy trying to figure out you can basically make do. And so when you're putting a financial product together, money is really scary. Like, technology and money are both very scary things for a lot of people, in a lot of places in the world. It's not something that a lot of people comes natural to a lot of people. So what we did, we said, well, if we want people in those markets to really actually be able to use this product, it has to be in their language. Like, it has to be in a format that they can comprehend and understand it. Legal agreements, customer support, the whole thing has to be in Spanish. The whole thing has to be in Portuguese. And so we invested very, very heavily from day one in doing that. And that's a big reason why today we know we are the dominant lender in Latin America and Canada. And we want to continue to double down in that part of the world because we see a huge amount of potential there.
Do you have, so your operations
awesome.
are only in Canada, or do you actually have any operations in Latin America? Like as
So,
far as like physical, like I guess, do you have an entity set up there?
right now, we basically operate over our Canadian entity, but we are doing some restructuring on that just to be able to be more agile and basically be able to cater to regulators in different parts of the world more effectively. So we're doing a little bit of restructuring on the entities that make up Ledn to basically optimize for that. But today, we basically serve everybody out of Canada.
So in theory, then, so not in theory, but so you don't need an entity in those areas to lend to those people.
So so that varies. So regulations vary product by product, market by market.
Okay, country by
country. So there are places in the world, for example, in the US, we don't offer a B2X loan. In states in the US, we don't offer certain products. Like New York, no products. We can't do that yet. In Texas, we can't offer our stablecoin savings account. So it varies really region by region, and there are some restrictions.
How much red tape do you deal with on a regular basis?
Yeah.
A lot.
Okay, so talk to us about. Sorry, are you still okay for time? We can move on quickly here. I need.
Yeah, I have a stop at 4:30, but
Okay, so let's keep going. So this BTX, your most popular product. Can you describe that one? You alluded to it earlier, but can you please describe it?
Yeah, for sure. So B2X is a product that came up or was developed as a result of what we saw our clients wanted or were doing with our loan products. A big chunk of loans that are backed by Bitcoin are from people that would like to use the loan proceeds to buy more Bitcoin because they don't feel like they feel like they don't have enough, and so they plan themselves properly. To your point, Tom, but essentially what happens is say Tom, you have, I don't know, 10 Bitcoin, you like where the market is, you think it's ready to run higher, but you don't, but you want to basically do you want to participate in this potential move. So you say, okay, I'm going to take one of my Bitcoins, I'm going to send it to Ledn. They basically will lend me the dollar value that the entire dollar value that my whole Bitcoin is worth today. They'll buy a second Bitcoin, and then I will have two Bitcoin at Ledn and an outstanding loan for $50,000 plus, whatever interest and fees. So what you would want to happen, obviously, as part of you participating in that position, is you would want Bitcoin prices to rise. So let's say Bitcoin goes to $100,000, right? Well, your collateral for that loan is worth $200,000 now. And the loan amount doesn't really change because the loan that we lent you hasn't changed. We always lent you $50,000. So in a month's time or 2 months' time, when your collateral is worth $2,000 or $200,000, you can turn around and say, hey, Ledn, I'd like to repay those $50K and get my excess Bitcoin back. And so we say, great, Tom, we need a half of a Bitcoin right now. So you have two. So we'll take half of your Bitcoin and off you go with 1.5 Bitcoin. So in essence, you went in with 1 Bitcoin, you walked out with 1.5 Bitcoins.
And I can see why people really want to do that, because if you're sold on the price, now there's the other side of this coin that we should talk about, the situation, the down, which we kind of alluded to in the other case that you have to be aware of. But if you've convinced yourself that it's going to go up and you can survive any downs, decreases in price, and then recollateralize if the call comes in from Ledn saying, hey, you got to put up more collateral, because is it the same situation if the price comes down? So let's talk about that other case.
100%.
Price comes down, and then you're like, you have to collateralize so that the loan to value stays at the same ratio. Correct?
Correct. You have to bring your loan to value out of 70, right? Like you have to send enough Bitcoin so that you're not in this 70 to 80 request for additional collateral, basically the situation. So what happens is, say you got it at $50,000, right? You got your loans, you have a $50,000 loan backed by $100,000 worth of collateral, right? That's day one. Your collateral drops by 30%, right? So your Bitcoin's worth 70K. We lent you 50. It's getting really close to what we lent you. So we'll tell you, bring it back to 100. Like bring the collateral back to 100. Send that additional 30 so that your collateral value is 100 and the loan's still 50, right? So if you're able to do that, then your loan becomes healthy again. and you basically, you can do another 30% down and potentially have to recollateralize again, or if it bounces, then you're good to go. Essentially, your loan is in a good standing when you've recollateralized it.
And the and the minimum for that type of loan product is the same, like $500 worth. Wow. Correct. You know what's interesting? So you said that loan amount is low on purpose to serve a lot of people around the world. So you have a very, it's a really principled approach to what you're doing here. On the flip side to that, I'm just thinking of some Canadians who this is brand new to. That low loan amount really makes it interesting to try you out. Because I could see someone like myself and Nick saying, okay, this seems crazy. It seems too good to be true. Mauricio seems like a good guy. Ledn seems like it's a good Canadian company. I'm going to go crazy and give the full $500 minimum. Do you know what I mean? Just to like, how does this work? Let me ride this through and say, okay. And then I could see myself even taking it back from you guys. Okay, give it back. Put it in the savings account. Okay, give it back to me. Did I get it back? And calling Nick, I think they're legit. They gave me the Bitcoin back. Like I could see a little bit of that comfort because it's so new.
It happens all the time.
Does it?
We see it all the time. Like people will send Bitcoin as a request to withdraw same day just to see what the processing times are. We see guys come in at $500 B2X. A month goes by, they repay it, and then they start.
Yeah, then they come in. They come in large.
Yeah. So like the progression has been, historically so far has been really positive. Like people come in, and that to us tells us that the product resonates, right? Like if we were seeing the opposite, like if we were seeing people churn and become one-time users, then the product, something's off with the product. But actually, most of our clients on average do more than one B2X.
Wow. Okay. And I think it's just the appropriate time for everyone listening is, you have to do your own research for this. You have to make sure you have enough collateral. This is advanced stuff that we're talking about here. This isn't some way to get rich quick or something like this. Is, you need to study this. You need to have comfort. You need to be in the financial situation to pull it off. And Mauricio, I know you agree with that. I just feel I would hate for anyone listening to this who does not know us to think, oh, this is like some easy way to make money. No. There's always risks. Just as you said, the price could come down tomorrow. We don't know. We have our beliefs, and I'm sure our beliefs are pretty in line, Mauricio, with your beliefs, but you never know. Right?
No, and we like to be very, very transparent about that. Like the last thing we want, as I said, is to have somebody that didn't understand the product to become, overly, get stuck in a situation where they did too much, they can't really manage it, and then they're going to walk out with a crappy product experience or a crappy user experience. So that we try to protect ourselves about that. We don't like scaring people. We don't like telling people, hey, this is good. Like we like to be transparent and pragmatic about the potential benefits and the potential risks. And then you can make your own decision and plan yourself accordingly. A lot of this is not necessarily, many of these situations when things don't go as planned, it's not that the product is broken, it's that the planning wasn't done properly. You overdid the amount that you could have done. You could have taped, you could have essentially prepared yourself for a bad case scenario. Most people just look up. It's important to be able to look down and say, okay, am I okay if this happens? Will I be okay? Will I be able to recover from, having to recollateralize a loan or having to do X? We have people, that's funny. Like, so people find really creative ways to use our products. We have people that essentially take out Bitcoin backed loans and they send enough Bitcoin to their savings accounts so that their Bitcoin interest is offsetting their loan interest. So it's, and when they have it in the savings account, it's basically ready to be sent to recollateralize if needed, because intra-Ledn transfers are free. And so in high volume situations, what happens is the network gets very congested. It becomes very hard for you to send Bitcoin from one address to the other, even if you're paying a ton of money. It just won't get confirmed. When you have your Bitcoin at Ledn and you're sending it from your savings account to your loan, that doesn't go through the chain. That gets done way faster and for free. So most of our clients, we let them know, this is part of this loan management email, is that the best way to top up your loan in a high volatility situation is from your savings account.
It is a brand new world, Nick.
It's just what you said, just like the example. Just the example he shared right there about what someone's doing between the two accounts. It just shows the opportunities that are available.
Yeah. Well, and I think some purists in the world would freak out on that statement because they're like, well, what do you mean I can do it? Then it's not where? It's not on the blockchain somewhere? Like, I'm sure, Mauricio, you deal with that kind of comment, correct?
No, I mean, at the beginning more so than now. I think a lot of the OGs communities. It's funny. A lot of them are actually clients. And if you look at our website, you look at the testimonials. A lot of the guys that are there they're not your keys, not your coin kind of guys, but they get. So like, in what universe do you not borrow against a reserve asset?
Yeah. I get
a
it.
Reserve asset. And that's part of why we were so infatuated with this idea of lending back by Bitcoin, because we said reserve assets are collateral. Like that's what
they are the best collateral. Yeah. And Bitcoin is the most pristine, best collateral of anything any of us have ever seen. I don't know if it's Robert Breedlove who mentioned on the podcast. I can't remember who said it to me, but it's the apex predator of collateral. Let's face it.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And God bless Michael Saylor for popularizing Bitcoin-backed loans. I'll be forever indebted to
He's putting everybody to shame. Can you imagine he was listening to this and I'm talking about a $500 test? Okay, I just want to test this with $500, but we can all be our own Michael Saylor, I guess. There you go.
And that's exactly it. It's I know it sounds a little bit crazy and perhaps a little bit far-fetched, but you're using your Bitcoin to get liquidity to buy more Bitcoin. That type of product was available only for incredibly sophisticated institutions not too long ago. And today, it's a product that can be accessed by millions of people all over the world. And in the right hands, and if used properly, it can unlock a world of wealth.
Nick, anything else to ask before we wrap up here?
No, I don't know. I think that kind of sums it up.
Mauricio, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. We're pumped for you to be doing what you're doing. If there's anything we can do ever, please reach out. I'm sure our audience is going to love listening to this. I'm sure there's going to be follow-up questions. We might bug you to come back at some, we'll give you a few months. I know you're a little bit busy. We'll give you some time. I might bug you, but thank you for sharing your story. Not only your story just helps kind of frame all of this. So thank you for sharing all that. If anyone listening to this, the URL is ledn.io. So ledn.io, and you can set up an account. It looks like on your website, Nick and I have not done this yet, but I think on your account, it says you can set up an account. Is it same day almost?
A few minutes. If you have your ID handy and a smartphone or a computer with a camera, it takes probably less than 5 minutes.
Very cool, Mauricio. Nick, that's it? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, this is what I'm doing on this weekend. I got to try it out now.
Yeah. You're going to see the $500 deposit and withdraw. Who's this guy? Who are these guys? Nick and Tom. $500 in, $500.
No, I'll go big Tom. I'll go 501.
Why? Yeah, do it again, Nick. Do it again. Do we get it back again? Did we get it?
Yeah. No, I look forward to it. And also, please, if you guys, once you do that, if you have any feedback, and same goes to everyone listening, like, that's how we get better, is through feedback. So please don't be shy. Ping us. If there's products you'd like to see from us, if there's things that we could be doing better, things you want to see more of us doing, please feel free to reach out.
Mauricio, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate this. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're so busy. We'll do this again at some point. Take care. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mauricio.
Hey everybody, so hopefully you enjoyed that episode with Mauricio. Fascinating story, just his own personal story, and then what's happening with Ledn. Ledn again is ledn.io. You can check them out there. And if you want any information from us, you can get our app at ylytapp.com. That's ylytapp.com for all the different real estate information that we're putting out. That's it for this episode. Until next time, your life, your terms.